I'm here with Mark Hilbert, and you don't get a chance very often to actually spend time with the person who came up with an idea of a museum, funded it, got all the art, and he's taken the time to tell us a little bit about it. So right now, we were just talking about the sculpture, or well, you could call it a sculpture. It's a mosaic done in 1969. This weighed what? You said like 4 tons?
It weighs 6 tons.
6 tons to put this up.
Right.
It was great to get the donation right, but
Yes.
then you realized, oh, it's 6 tons.
And a lot of steel to hold it up.
And a lot of steel. And those are the kind of things that you
Yeah.
have to deal with, right?
That's
When
right.
you're taking a museum
Yeah.
from the ground. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit, this was pre-existing buildings, but tell me what you had to do to get to this point.
Sure. So it was 2 pre-existing concrete tilt-up buildings going in 2 different directions. And we had this mosaic that we wanted to put on the museum, and the architect came up with, Johnson Markley from Santa Monica, came up
Yes.
with this very unique way of connecting the 2 buildings with this floating rectangle here that you see.
Yes. And this and I call it a sculpture, but it's really not. I guess it's a painting / sculpture. This took how many people and how long to make this piece?
Well, there was a whole group that was set up in 1960s to do these for the home savings loans. They did about 120 of these home savings loans around the country. So it was a whole team of people, including architects that actually designed the buildings and decorators to decorate the insides of the buildings.
Right.
So it was quite an organization.
And so when that
Run by
went down,
Run by Miller Sheets.
oh, he ran the whole operation.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great thing for an artist.
Yes, wasn't it? A pretty creative outlet.
So when you come to the Hilbert Museum, this is a brand new museum. We're going to go look at it. Mark's going to tell us some more about the museum itself. But remember, when you see it, you've got 2 buildings that had to be put together, a multi-million-dollar mosaic that's in front that greets you right next to the train station you can get to, and it's very close to Chapman College.
Right, in the city of Orange.
And the city of Orange. Let's go see what else is in the museum. So we're in the museum itself right now, and I love the fact that we walk in a museum and we've got all this very fine art. We've got a Pelton, we've got Acoma and a Zia pot that greet you, which really shows your vision to some extent, I think, and I'd like to ask you about,
Sure.
you know, this use of multicultural imagery of Native and Western and specifically California art. And a lot of it's historical art, right?
Correct.
Yes,
That's
so
right.
maybe you could just, what was your vision when you started this?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't have a vision. I just started
Right.
collecting Native American.
Exactly.
So I started collecting Pueblo pottery and,
Right.
and blankets and other Native American, historic Native American things. Then later, we bought a house in Palm Springs, and we needed to put something on the walls, so I got hooked into the California Scene idea, and I saw the California Scene book that was written by Gordon McClellan called The California Style, and went through that. I was going through it, and I thought, gee, this is everyday life in California. I can relate to this, so I'm going to start collecting
And you're a
this.
native Californian?
Yeah.
Yeah, that helps.
So, so our focus has been on collecting California scene paintings, and we have, but then with the Indian art and with some of the other collections, we have over 5,000 objects here at the museum to see.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, and we've just touched the bases. We're walking in the door and you see a big Millard Sheets, which was the same thing we saw as we came in, but in a completely different style. And why is this painting kind of the instrumental piece when you come in? Is there a reason? I mean,
Yeah,
it's great painting, obviously, but
Well, it's a good question. In 1938, there was a judging of artwork from all over the world at the Chicago Art Institute. And they had over 2,000 artists from all over the world compete. This was the triple gold medal at that event. And interestingly enough, it just takes place about 8 miles from here, where you can see flooding going on. It's a very complex composition. You see flooding going on, and it's actually, a dam was built, and the backwater was starting to cover up some of these ranches there. This was located in the little village of Prado.
so he's actually making a social commentary of what's
Yes.
going on.
Yeah,
to the ranchers, the farmers
Yeah.
of this area in
Yeah.
1938.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you have to think, because that's really Dust Bowl time. Grapes of Wrath is written in
Yeah.
1939,
Yeah, yeah.
and now and this is even predates it by a little bit, but that sense is there.
Yes.
And I'm sure people could really relate to that at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's got original frame, it looks like.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so that's a pretty great painting to open the museum with. And these things, I'm sure, change periodically. You guys have only been open for a few months, right?
Yeah, yeah. Our goal is to change out different shows every 90 days. So
Nice.
there's always something new to see.
Yes, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's ambitious. I like
Yeah.
that. Well, let's see what else you want to show us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's start off in
Okay.
this gallery here. This painting right here is one of the signature paintings of the Art Museum. It's by Miller Sheets,
Yes.
the same man that did the
Yes.
mosaic in front. And it takes place in San Dimas, California. It was painted about 1933. And it's a beautiful painting painted in the, well, I forget the word, but it's very detailed, very tightly rendered piece. And it's kind of a moody piece, an atmospheric piece. And it conjures up different feelings in different people. Some people feel like a sense of isolation.
Oh yeah, I see Hopper right here.
You see Hopper.
You know, you got the car, you've got
That's
this
right.
lone individual that's kind of lit up.
Yeah.
This is like the hotel things that in restaurants Hopper does. Same kind of time frame. I'm sure they knew each other.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
yeah, it's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really one of our signature paintings in the collection, as I mentioned earlier. It's a very powerful piece.
And is this show that's going on right now it looks like it's all Miller's sheets?
Yes, it's
from what I see.
It's a retrospective of his work from the earliest work all the way up to his latest work. He passed away, I think, actually in 1989.
1989. And so it made sense. First of all, you obviously have a large collection of Miller's sheets. You
Yeah.
like his work clearly
Yeah,
just by
sure.
what I see here.
Yeah.
But it made sense for you to go, okay, he's in the front of the building. Let's do a retrospective of what
Exactly,
we have. Yeah.
right.
And had anybody done a retrospective of his work?
It's been done, but it's been many years since it happened.
Yeah.
So probably 25 years.
Yeah. See, that's to me the great thing about having a smaller museum. You can take on these shows that other people may have missed and shouldn't have, like Miller Sheets. He's a super important artist. And then you can bring him back to life and show, hey, look at the things that he accomplished.
He was, in the early days, he was one of the most important artists in California.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And had international fame.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's...
He's one of the few artists that submitted his work to the French Salon in Paris and was accepted.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's the kind of things we get to learn, right? I come here and I get to learn about... I know about the artist. I've had his paintings, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
So I do now, though. So let's keep seeing. So as we look, we've got just a variety. Looks like we've got watercolors, and then you have a piece this is a oil.
Yes,
Big major oil.
This is an oil from 1929. He was 22 years old when he did this painting.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. And it's a recreation of the Civil War era.
Yes.
Where the slaves were picking cotton, and there's a wagon in the back. And this is a recreation of the Civil War era that was done sometime, someplace in the Central Valley of California.
So you have all these things. You have Depression era. You have historical rendition, and it just keeps going on and on. Is there any others that you really particularly? Yeah. Again, I mean, you see this, you think of Hopper, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's just like there's no doubt about it.
This looks like Nighthawks.
Yeah, it does.
However, this was done 10 years before Nighthawks was done.
Yes, that's right.
So,
That's, yeah,
and
it's
again,
interesting.
they were friends. Who knows if this piece resonated with Hopper at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that
You
kind of
don't know.
stuff went back and forth.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
question.
You
Yeah.
know, you see, even with Dixon,
Yeah.
Maynard Dixon, there's people that he's being influenced
Oh,
by.
absolutely.
You know, and it's just, and he knew Sheets as well,
Yeah.
so interesting. And how long did it take you to put this collection? I mean, I see 50, 60 paintings here together. Was
Probably 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so as a collector now, museum developer, did you kind of put the word out to dealers and say, I'm looking for really beautiful, great examples of Millard sheets?
Sure. You almost don't have to put the word out.
Yeah, it does it itself. It's fire.
That's like fire. That's right.
And so, and then at what point did you realize, you started collecting 50 years ago, what point did you go, and these 30 years ago, did you go, I think I want to do a museum? What point
Well, that's a
did
good
that
question. It goes back probably about 12 years ago. I went to a museum in Los Angeles, and I was very disappointed, really, with the kind of work that I saw there. I couldn't relate to any of it. And I'm driving home thinking about it, and thinking that, well, we've been loaning our work to museums, and
Right.
Maybe it's time for us to consider doing a museum.
Right.
I didn't know how I was going to make that happen at the
sure.
time. But I came home and told my wife what my wishes were, and as always, she supported me 100%. And it was a number of years before all the pieces fell into place about creating an art museum at Chapman University in Orange, California.
Yes.
I went to them and approached them with the idea, and they were very receptive because they didn't have an art museum.
Yes.
And here we are today.
Yes. Yeah. And so you found the museum, you found the space, and that was only 12 years ago.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sure that accelerated the whole process of also you thinking differently about your own collection and how you wanted to add to it and what you wanted to see.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And that's the fun part, right?
Yeah, sure, evolution.
Yeah, and you get to collect more.
Yeah.
Because now you're not limited to your own walls, you know, and you're already donating or loaning things, like you loaned some pieces right to Crystal Bridges recently and things like
the
that.
Getty Museum.
And the Getty Museum.
Yeah.
So now you get to do that. I can see how fun that is. I mean, we do it on a smaller process with our Maynard-Dixon Museum, but you know, to see what's possible is really exciting for me.
It's a lot of fun, and for me, sharing with the community is the big thing. The museum is free admission, so it presents no barriers for people to come to the museum.
And you had said that you really wanted to try to focus on getting more kids in the area. There's 1 million people in this vicinity of Orange, and get more children to be able to come.
Well, too many young, all they know is what's here.
Yes.
And by bringing them to an art museum, you open them up to a whole new world.
Correct.
So I think it's such an important thing for parents and grandparents to bring their kids or their grandkids to an art museum and open up their world.
Right, and they can see a traditional imagery. I mean, you have things like Agnes Pelton, who's, I'm looking at past, it's, you know, a modernist and does his stuff. So it's not like it's not there, but at the same time, you can see Millard sheets, you can see Acoma pots, and we're also going to get to look at a exhibit of Navajo blankets.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. All right, show me anything else you want to show me. I mean, it's for me, it's exciting just to see all this work, because like this painting to me is just fantastic.
Isn't that a fantastic piece?
I just love that painting.
Well, that's a painting
1929.
of Chavez Ravine in 1929.
Yes.
He's again 22 years old when he did this. And you're almost looking in the backyards of some of the residents of Chavez Ravine, which later was abolished, and that's where they put Dodger Stadium in.
Wow.
So there was quite a challenge to be able to get these people repositioned in different neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a whole story there.
There is a story. It was a major story in 1952, 53, when they were evicting these people. It was on television just about every night, the process.
Yeah. Well, if you want to do a book and you're an author out there, I know where your book cover is. Right there.
It's a beautiful painting.
Wouldn't that be an amazing book cover? Yes, it would.
So this painting right here is a more modernist example of Miller Sheets' work. If you notice that the space is very flattened, very simplified forms, blocks of color, all of the characteristics of more modern pieces. And this was done at a time when he was in Honolulu teaching art at the Honolulu Art Institute. It was about 1935.
Wow, that's very interesting.
He was there in 35 and 36, and he created.
What do you
some
think
of
that
these.
did to him as far as an artist? Because you spent 2 years in Hawaii. That's going to change your sensibilities.
Oh, absolutely. You can see this painting is dramatically different
Yes.
than the other pieces he was doing previously. It's
Yes.
done in a more modern way. It's got, look at the fact that this mountain is blue. He's really changed his color palette. It's quite surprising.
Yeah, no, it definitely has that sense of what was going
Yeah,
on in
yeah.
that 30s time
yeah.
frame to me.
And it was the beginning of a lifelong interest in traveling the world. So the rest of the pieces that you're going to see in the show
all
here
that.
are paintings of Tahiti,
Yes.
Japan, Honolulu again.
Yes, and you look at this painting, 35,
Yeah.
Hawaii. This is 67.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can you get a sense of what was there, the flatness and the things, but he's even changed and evolved
You see
to this pointillism kind of
Yeah,
thing. he's doing.
exactly. Yeah.
You know, really interesting.
Yeah, totally
I
different.
love the fact you juxtapose those together.
Yeah, and I think this is probably an example of, it says women of the islands, but I think he's back here in Hawaii. He actually bought a home in the big island of Hawaii.
You would have known Marge Tennant. So she was an artist, very well known, that worked from the 30s to probably like the 70s or so. And he would have known her.
I'm sure.
And it'd be interesting if you could get a Marge Tennant to put in here as well.
Yeah, that would be.
Because I see a correlation. I actually collect her work.
Do
and
you?
that's yeah, very interesting. I love, see, this is why you go to museums, because you can learn things, right? I didn't know about this, but now I can see it. I can put the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
because you had a vision.
Well, thank you.
That's why it happens. Visions can be that way. Don't limit your visions. Obviously, you have not.
Thank you.
This is a beautiful painting.
So now we're in another show called the Matter of Style show,
Yeah.
which is a example of what was going on in California in the area of modernism between 1930 and 1970. So you have these two tracks. You have the track of more modern pieces,
Right.
and then you have the track of people that continue to do traditional art.
Right.
So they just didn't stop and then something else starts, and
Right.
these things happened in parallel.
That's right. In fact, I mean, you can, because of Dixon, they were competing too.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and artists were trying to figure out what to do. Like, do I go this modern route?
Yes.
There's a lot of energy there.
That's right.
Still is.
Totally.
You know, and so they're having to make decisions
Yeah.
in their own world, their own,
Yeah.
how they do
Yeah.
see the world.
But oddly enough, the art world is kind of coming back to traditional art
Yeah,
again.
I think there's a lot of, you know, you have a lot of younger Western artists
Yeah.
that, you know, they see their own twist to how it may be.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, like a Josh Gibson or even a Mark Marjorie or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Logan Hajez. All these individuals have their own sense, but it is,
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I kind of feel that a lot of that comes too from people like Ed Mell, who just passed, and he
Yeah,
left
that's
his, you know,
Trademark.
legacy. Yes, that's right. People can build on
yeah,
it, just
sure.
like I'm sure they're building on her work as
Sure,
well. Still.
absolutely. Yeah. So her work has become very popular.
Very popular.
She's being compared very favorably with Georgia O'Keeffe
That's right,
now.
and rightly so, I think.
I think she's on
Yeah.
the same level.
Which is interesting because you have a huge collection.
Yeah.
Because she didn't do a lot of this work anyway.
She
It was
did.
hard.
We have 4 paintings here.
Yeah, that's hard to get.
It's really hard to find.
I've had one in 35 years
Really?
That's
Oh my
it.
goodness.
of this type of
Yes.
work. I've had her desert stuff.
Well, the transcendental is the rare
Yeah.
work, which you see here.
Yeah.
These 3 paintings languished in a basement for 50 years and were not seen. This is really the first big public opening of people being able to see these 3 paintings.
Wow.
And I think they're absolutely fantastic.
Wow, this one really is really
This happens to be my favorite.
Yeah.
I think it's just an amazing painting. The subtlety of the colors in this is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and see, you can love a painting like this, and then you can collect Native American art and see
Yeah.
the same kind of emotion that you have for it
Yeah.
as Miller's sheets and others, which we're going to find out.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, this is very, very fun.
Well, let's see. This is an interesting artist. I don't know if you can capture this on film. because it's very detailed. You have to really get up close.
Yeah, I love this. You can see this is that classic kind of 30s WPA sensibilities with these. I'm assuming that's when
These are
from.
wood engravings.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
On wove Japanese paper. But absolutely unbelievable.
And so how did you find this person? Somehow one of these is probably the first one you collected. Do you know which one it is?
Well, I can't tell you because some of these are from other collections, not just ours.
Yes.
But I saw one of these at a show.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I think this man's interesting. I'm going to see if I can collect some of it.
And he's a California artist?
California artist.
And do you really try to focus in just on those artists that are from California?
Well, in our California scene paintings, of course, it's all California artists. But we do have other artists like Norman Rockwell, for example, in our American Illustration Gallery.
Right.
So we do have other artists, but our main focus is on California scene paintings.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Every gallery and every museum should have a focus.
Yeah.
And know what it is from the beginning if they can.
So here are some of the more abstract examples. Here's a painting by Carl Benjamin, who was a artist that came out of the Claremont schools, and he did this, what they call hard edge abstraction. And it's interesting to see. It doesn't particularly appeal to me. I wouldn't hang this on my wall personally, but I do find it interesting and colorful, and this is a really good example of his work.
Yeah, it looks like an Ellsworth Kelly kind of sensibility, that type of thing.
Sure.
Which is a movement in time frame. So this one was done in 56, So that's an early piece
50s,
too.
60s.
Yeah. But you know, I think, and I'm sure it's somewhat hard for you, you put your name on the building, you put the work together, you build the building, you find it, you have a vision, but at some point, like a child, you also have to go, okay, grow, and you know, you have a director who runs it, and go, okay, this is important as well. Like you said, I might not put it on my wall, but I know it's important and I want to put it in the museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That makes for a good museum.
Makes it interesting.
It does, because it allows other voices to percolate through. So it's a whole experience of art. Conrad Buff, who I love.
Here's an interesting example of his work right here, with all these wonderful colors. This is early. This was probably done in the 30s, and he has this unusual brushstroke, almost looks like little tit-tat-toe kind of puzzles.
Yeah, I think he's really undervalued, underappreciated, and again, he's a really great California artist. But I think he's one that has not quite been found. There's a book that's been on it. George Stern did a book on him, and really has helped that market. But again, I think he's one of those that, you know, it's not been quite found.
I agree.
And I think that will change over time.
But look at the beautiful shapes and colors. And then, if that isn't enough, look at this interesting shadow that he puts in here that really adds another dimension to the painting.
No, I really like his stuff. And in our own little museum, we actually have a buff that he did of Maynard Dixon's home in Utah.
Really?
And he did a self-portrait of Dixon as well. They were good friends.
Obviously.
And Dixon, you know, if you're going to be a good friend with Dixon, you're probably a pretty good artist.
I would guess.
Yeah, because he would pull no punches and say, you got to work on this and that.
Right. So over here we have a Susan Hertel. And Susan Hertel was Miller's assistant in creating the mosaics.
Oh, wow.
So she worked for him for 25 years in Claremont. At the studio.
Wow, I really like her stuff.
And she, of course, loved animals. And every painting that she did, you know, had animals in them. So
And did you become aware of her through Millard Sheets working in his studio? Is that how this came here?
No, it was really another collector. He had this particular painting hanging in his office. And I just kept looking at it, and over a period of time I thought, you know, who is this Susan Hertel? And I did a little research, and I found out that, she's a pretty interesting artist. So this is actual piece that was in my friend's gallery. He's passed away now, but his wife was good enough to lend it to us.
It has to be exciting when you find somebody you didn't know and go,
Yeah.
that's somebody special.
Well, there's so many artists that were working in California.
Yes, still are.
There still are. And part of the reason is the weather. Artists could work plein air if they wanted. The other real reason is the huge increase in the studios. The studios had a voracious appetite for artists to do set design, paint the backdrops, to do the animation, and to create the posters, the movie posters.
Just everything.
So they had a voracious appetite, and artists came from all over the world to work at the
and
studios.
really good artists, because it was very competitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
they only hired the best. And I know Walt's criteria for hiring an artist was that the artist had to tell a story. And which brings me to one of the reasons that this museum is here is that we're really a narrative museum. We're a storytelling museum. And a lot of museums have taken off in a different direction, which is fine.
Right.
But we're kind of sticking with wanting to tell stories.
Yes. And you talk about Walt, who's Walt Disney. He's just there. Walt Disney's Disneyland.
The greatest storyteller of all time.
15 minutes from here.
Yeah, that's right.
So that seems he would approve. I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Sure.
So
This is really
we're
nice.
moving into the next gallery, which is Migdio Vasquez, who actually lived 3 blocks up the street.
Oh, wow.
So we're actually located in the Cypress Barrio, and there's still a local barrio association that gets together and meets. So we thought it appropriate that since we're in the barrio, that we ought to feature one of their great artists from that period. And Migdio did a lot of murals and around Orange County. And of course, he was a fine artist. So several years ago, a collector by the name of Fred Ortiz walked into our gallery and says, I have a collection of 60 of Migdio's work. Would you like to show it? And so here we are, opening show. I happen to like this particular piece, one of my favorites, because it's just such a period piece.
Right.
With the Zoot Suiters. This was created actually
99.
in 1999, but I think it's a throwback maybe in time. But I just love the sensibility and
the Hispanic culture, which is
Right.
so important in America, actually, not just California.
Here's another example. I mean, this is really done
that's
in
great.
precisionist style,
Yeah.
and I just think it's a snapshot.
I love this guy.
Yeah, right.
So, he's watching out.
With the
everything
waterfall.
else. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, lovely.
So
And
we
it
have,
goes all the way around.
Yeah, so we have quite a few, and I'm going to also announce that Fred is contemplating donating this entire collection to our museum.
Wow.
So it's very exciting for
That
us.
is. And I think important too, because you're bringing in an artist from the region, from this area specifically, who addresses a different kind of sensibility of how he sees the world.
Yeah, exactly.
In his world, this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we always want to have a wide variety of things for people to see when they come to the museum, and this is a slice of life that I find very interesting.
Yes. I mean, you look at it, and I immediately go, that's got to be Frito.
Yes, that's right.
Exactly. Yeah, very nice. Interesting. I really like his work.
So this completes our tour of the South Building.
Okay.
And we have one more building to go. This building is focused on rotating shows that rotate. The North Building is focused on what we call the permanent collection, but it's really a misnomer. It comes 100% from our collections. And there's rotation there, but it rotates at a slower pace.
Yes.
So maybe 25%.
So more permanent.
Change. Right.
People can come, they have a little, and there'll be certain pieces people will want to see over and over again too.
That's right.
Just like they are in any other place.
That's
There's
right.
some of the ones that are the core
to
the museum.
That's right.
So let's go see the core pieces. That'll be wonderful.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So and now the next building is, do you call this the North?
The North Building.
North Building, and this is more of your collection.
Right.
Like really emphasis of a lot of this is your collection.
Yeah, this is virtually 100% our
Okay.
collection. And here's a beautiful example of Fletcher Martin, 1938. And I love the big figures in this.
Yeah, that's a wonderful painting.
Reminds me very much of Diego Rivera and some of the murals that he was
Yeah.
doing. And you notice how rounded
Yes.
the arms and so forth
The figures are.
with the shading. It reminds me so much of Diego Rivera and also Picasso in 1922 and 23 when he reverted back to representational art.
This one I would think would be a hard one to pull out of your house, and
It was.
yeah, because it's a special painting. I can tell
Yeah.
just looking at it.
Sure. Well, it was in our living room for the last 25 years.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's nice that you put it here where it's the entry piece to what you see.
Right.
What's that
Yeah.
like when you go, okay, this has been part of my life for 20 years. I love the painting, I understand the painting, and now it's not part of your living room, it's here. What does that feel
Well,
like?
you know, I'm happy to share it.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be able to share this with other people
Yeah.
because sitting in my living room, I can't share it with many people.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to.
But I bet you've sat in front of this painting for a lot of hours, many times,
Oh, yeah.
over many
Yeah,
years,
sure.
decades.
Yeah.
And now others see it. And I'm sure they'll see things too, maybe that you didn't see.
Absolutely.
That will go, "Ah, how did
I
I
learn
not
all
see
the
that?"
time
Yeah.
from people, visitors that recognize things in paintings,
Yes.
places that they've been. It's all part of our story. It's an
Yes.
evolving story.
Yeah, this is a special painting. I could see it was.
Now, one of the other great artists from California
Yeah,
in the
Hockney.
60s was David Hockney,
Yeah.
who lived in California, I don't know, maybe 50 years.
Yeah.
And his most famous for his pool series.
Correct.
So we're lucky to have an example of his pool
Yes.
series. But we have 3 or 4 David Hockneys in the collection.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that we can show a variety of different sides of his work.
Yeah,
over the
and he
years.
has really gotten to be, I mean, he's, if not the most, he may be the most expensive living contemporary artist in the world.
Yeah, his pool pieces, I don't know, there's no end in sight. They could go for $100 million.
They have, I think.
Have they?
Yeah.
Crazy. Another important artist
Oh, yeah,
is
Wayne
Wayne
Thiebaud.
Thiebaud.
Yeah, I love that.
And his work
that's
is
a nice one.
is going for millions of dollars.
Yeah, it is.
In his larger work. He lived in Sacramento, and he was doing amazing things, and this is no exception.
Yeah, this is one of his gumbos. And you know, we talk about value and those kind of things, but the only reason I really think we bring it up is it just shows how hard it is to put together a collection of really important artists today. That, you know, because Thiebaud, I've been trying to get a Thiebaud in my own collection for decades, and it's beyond me. So I'll come and visit here and
Yeah.
see a great example.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is nice, beautiful. And so are the walls permanent? I guess they are, right? These walls?
Yeah, these walls, yeah.
Oh, Phil Dyke, yeah.
So this is one of the signature paintings of our collection. This beautiful scene of downtown Los Angeles, about 1939. This is where the city started. I mean, for example, there's down a few steps down here. This
Right.
is Alvera Street, but down a few steps is a fountain and a what do you call it? A well, water well. And it's interesting to think that when the Pueblo de Los Angeles was established in 1860s, that this water was the water that the entire community of Los Angeles was using.
Right. So a critical component of life.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Which still is.
It still is.
interestingly.
So here we have this bench here that you can still go downtown LA. You can take the train across the street
Right.
downtown, walk across the street and sit in this bench.
Wow.
Well, what's interesting about this painting, it was done by Phil Dyke. He was working at Disney at the time, and it's a great example of his ability with color, in this case, largely with the greens. But he was
Yeah.
hired to do Fantasia, to do the color work for Fantasia, got an Academy Award for it. So he was amazing amazing artist, as you can see. And here's an example of little storytelling. That's his wife, and that's his son Woody in the painting. And if you look in the back, you'll see somebody debating. You know, this was pre-war.
Yes.
And they were debating whether to go into war or whether to not go into war.
Right.
And so those debates were happening all over America. But this is a very narrative piece.
Very much so.
There's over 100 people in this painting.
Yes.
And
there's
again,
dozens of different things. I mean, you have the church over here. You know, you have maybe talking about civil rights type issues.
Yeah.
You know, you just have everything. You just have life going on, newspapers, everything. Yeah, you're right. It's an incredible narrative piece.
It's Sunday afternoon in the park, so
Yeah.
it's an example of everyday life in California.
So different than his Arizona pieces, too.
Yeah, totally.
You know, there's mine pieces that we talked
Yes.
about. I mean, the colors are completely different.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
all about reds and, you know, somber colors, too. And this is very green. And yeah, I've never seen this painting.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and was this one that was in your house for a long time as well?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But we've shown it here at the museum since it opened 8 years
Yes.
ago.
Yeah, that's a great die. He's one of my favorite
Thank you.
artists. So.
Another artist, this is back to Fletcher Martin.
Yeah.
It was one of the first paintings that we saw. Fletcher Martin was in the Navy. He was also a fighter in the Navy.
Oh, interesting.
And I think in many ways that this is a self-portrait. And if you look at it, you realize that he doesn't have his boxing gloves on yet, but he's anticipating what's
Right.
about to happen. And you can see that kind of worried look on his face.
Yes.
You know, it's like almost like a self-portrait from a guy that knows
Yeah.
what it's like to go into the ring.
Yeah. Well, he's a Navy fighter, too, because you look at this guy, you can see
Yes.
he's in the Navy.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a Navy piece, USN, yeah.
Then you've got the, you know, the tattoo.
United States Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was done in '38. Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it appealed to you because obviously you like his work, one of your major pieces,
Yeah.
hung in your home for 20 years, but also because of the story.
The story and also the big figures.
Yes.
You know, I really love figures in our paintings, and some of that goes back to my wife. You know, when I first started collecting art, I brought home a landscape. And my wife says, you know, it's a beautiful landscape, but it had figures in it. It would tell a story. And all of a sudden, the light bulb goes on in my head, and so I started focusing on figurative work. And then lo and behold, our museum has become known as a storytelling museum because of that.
Yeah. At what point did you go, oh, this is really something that there's a narrative through all of the things I'm collecting? I mean, because it probably at first was kind of subconscious. You didn't realize you were
Right.
doing it, right?
That's right.
And then at some point you go, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah. Well, it probably wasn't until the museum opened 8 years ago, and we're starting to think about the mission for the museum and what
Yes.
our mission was going to be. And that's when all of it kind of came together. And in our mission statement, we talk about the fact that we are a storytelling museum and that we are focused mostly on representational art from California artists. Now, we do have other things, of course, but that's the main focus.
Yes, that's interesting how that does that.
Yeah.
I think all collectors do that. Even in my own, I'm sure there's some underlying things that I don't even recognize,
Yeah.
but these are what I like.
Sure.
I know Billy Shank, he has got a beautiful collection. I was in his house and I'm like looking at everything and I realized you like women figures in almost all your paintings you collect. And he's like, oh, I guess I do. And it's like, but you can see it when you look, you go,
yeah.
oh yeah, that's there.
Yeah, sure.
That as a person, we don't even see
Yeah.
it. And you know, at some point you go, oh,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I can see why you would have this piece then. Very nice.
Here's something that's different by Nels Grin.
Yeah.
This is called magic realism. Now, magic realism is kind of hard to define, but you know it when you see it. And this is an example of that. People really enjoy this painting, but they don't know what it is.
Yes.
But there's something alive about this painting that I think that people pick up on subconsciously.
It reminds me of Bacos, you know, the Santa Fe artist a lot.
Right.
Quite honestly.
Yeah, the early Taos artists.
Yeah, and you see this Cezanne kind of, you know, cubism using figures that's in there, and
It's almost like those plants are animated.
Yeah, no, it's very. I like it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
I like 30s paintings anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Clearly, you do as well.
Well, it was a really interesting area because there was a lot of emotion going on. People lost their jobs
Yes.
during the Depression, and people, it was a raw time when Americans were very raw.
Yes.
And you see that rawness really in the paintings.
Well, I think it comes out in creativity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the only expression that you
Yeah.
can really give if you're an artist.
Yeah,
is,
that's right.
This is my life right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
You
And
know?
they really had to give
Yes.
it all. This is a painting by Lee Blair that worked at Disney, and his wife Mary Blair that also worked at Disney, and she later became a legend at Disney. And at the end, the last show that we have will be on Mary Blair. We'll talk more about that
Wow, a whole
later.
show on her.
But here it's a picnic scene with her easel and her paints looking down at Palos Verdes. And so again, we'll talk more about Mary Blair
Beautiful.
later.
Beautiful.
Now, I should point out that the North Gallery is set up by age and by date. So the earliest pieces were in the first gallery that goes back to 1894.
Okay.
And then each gallery we're going forward.
Aggressively.
We're still in the 30s, 40s area
Yes.
here. And we have this interesting scene called The Pied Piper by Dick Swift. And it's an interesting painting telling the story that in Los Angeles we had a group of locations where they played jazz, very much like Harlem in New York. And so, in fact, I had a fellow on one of the tours tell me that when he was young, he actually danced at this particular dance club. And I asked him, well, did it ever look like this? And he thought for a minute, and he says, yeah, around 3 a.m.
Yeah, it looks like they're having pretty much fun. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
It's a
So I
wonderful-
see. So yeah, we have 30s and 40s. And so
Yeah.
you have this, but then juxtaposed, you have a Edgar Payne
Right.
from that Canyon de Chelly.
Yeah, this is a great example of Canyon de Chelly. It's on loan courtesy of Joseph and Cheryl Schaefer,
Yes.
and we're very grateful
Yeah, it's a
to
major
be able to
Canyon
show
de
this
Chelly.
piece. And it's one of the few pieces in the North Building that are actually not in our collection.
But a great one.
But, it's
But
a
I
good
like the
example.
fact that it's in the same room, so you can see different things that were going on
Right.
in that
yeah,
time frame.
Right. So here we have an example
God, that's
by Edna Rindell. It's a realist piece.
Oh yeah.
So we have, within the collection, we've got a number of surrealist
Yeah,
artists.
it feels like a dolly, right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's called The End of Summer, and it has that vibe to it. It's
Yeah.
done in the precisionist style. And she was an important artist in the 30s and 40s, and she showed some of her work in New York as well.
I'm sure this was wild back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
1945 to do this.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
A pansy is the face of the person on the thing, and time is ticking away. Yeah, and all this stuff. Yeah, interesting.
Has a little Dali.
Yeah, and
reference
again,
at
it's a
time.
storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. There's a whole story.
Right.
Multiple stories.
Yes. Right.
And that's, I'm sure, appealed to you
Yeah,
because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I've always loved her stuff.
But this is a really good example
Yeah, it is.
of Jessie Arms Botke. They're lead beater cockatoos.
Yes.
And she did this in the 1930s. Interestingly enough, she was a decorator in Chicago in the 30s, and she decided to start painting paintings for her decoration projects, and she painted them all in gold leaf.
Yeah.
And then she moved to California, the Ventura area, and she started to raise birds in an aviary. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. It's gone. So here you have an example of that.
Yeah, that's a classic example
Yeah.
of what Baki's known
Yeah,
for. Yeah, with
yeah.
the gold. I love her gold, overlay that she does, and they're beautiful. And she should be in a California museum
Right.
because she's a really important California artist.
And very exotic with all the different plants in this too. I think it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I've always liked her work. And her husband was interesting because he did landscapes in some New Mexico, Cornelius Botke.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you guys have one of his pieces?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of course you do. I like his because I like the Southwest.
Yeah.
So he stands out for me, but I've always been a fan of her work.
Yeah. So this is a gallery on prints and lithographs. So we've got a variety of different lithographs here from our collection. This particularly beautiful Miller Sheets family flat. The oil painting, the original oil painting that he did for this ended up at the Roosevelt White House during the war, and then later became part of the Smithsonian Art Institute.
And you look
collection.
at this and you see that same one you showed me, that was of the region where Dodger Stadium.
Yes,
the
right.
same kind of sensibility with the clothes and
yeah,
things.
Yeah.
I don't know if we know where this was done.
This is Bunker Hill in Los Angeles. So this is, it's family flats. But look at the interesting way he uses clothesline, you know, to kind of move your eye around the painting. Very intelligently.
Yeah, that's a very
Beautiful example. And the original oil to this is a big oil. It's one of the great, it's actually one of the great American paintings in Smithsonian.
Wow. And so when you got this lithograph, did you know already about the Smithsonian painting?
Yeah.
I would assume, but
Yeah, I've been looking for this lithograph for many years.
yeah.
And,
So
finally
what's that
popped up.
like? You know this major important piece of an artist that you love,
Yeah.
and then you're out for this painting or this
Yeah.
lithograph, and
You just-
so how did it come to you? Do you remember?
Well, somebody called me up and offered it to me.
Yeah.
That was one of those serendipity times. Usually it's me out hunting,
Yes.
you know, different auctions or
Right.
dealers or whatever. But this came my way.
Well, they probably knew you were looking for sheets,
Oh, yeah.
I would think.
Well, at this point in time, all the dealers and artists know exactly what I want.
Yeah.
So when they get something good, they usually put me first on their list
As they
for a
should.
call.
Well, you know, I think there's a responsibility to some extent for dealers to do that, especially if they know it's going into going into a museum where other people can see
No,
it.
absolutely. Dealers are very interested in being able to sell work here so that it could be seen.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how they should be. Some don't. Some go, oh, I don't want it to go into a museum because I'll never get it back.
Well, the last thing they want to have happen is have a good piece leave California where it disappears.
Yes, I agree with that.
So it's pretty important.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, they can come and visit, right?
Yes.
They sell it
And
to
they
you.
do.
They can come and visit the
They
piece.
can come and visit.
Yeah.
And they absolutely
I'm
like
sure
to
they
do
do.
that.
I do that sometimes
Sure.
on pieces that I've placed in museums. And it's like, oh, I want to go see it.
Yes.
I like this. That's really nice. Yeah, it's really good.
So this is Theodophilus Brown,
Yes.
who was really one of those artists they call the Bay Area figurative group.
Yeah, Joan Brown and
Yeah.
the likes. Yeah, I love those.
But this is something kind of atypical for him,
Yes.
doing this factory scene. But I just love the sensibility, the way he uses perspective in this.
Yeah, you see that Wayne Thiebaud kind of thing too.
You do, yeah. It's very colorful, and it's big.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's important for museums. They need big works.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
it gets lost otherwise.
Yeah. Now this is an example of backdrops for cartoons.
Oh, that's cool.
Now this room, I forgot to mention, is now we're mid-century here, so
Yes.
we're now into the 50s and 60s here. And so you see the artwork is becoming more modern. And here, although these are backdrops for cartoons done in Hollywood, you get to see example modernism
Right.
creeping in. And here's a piece by Phil Dyke, who did the
Right, the painting of the
painting.
downtown
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
But here is in a much more modern mode. This is in the 60s.
Yes.
It's actually dated 55, but
Yeah, you can see
you
that.
can see the evolution.
And so, you know, how do you educate yourself? You have this broad knowledge, clearly, right? So you start with Native American art 50 years ago, and you end up with animation and everything in between. How does that happen?
Well, it's just evolution, I guess. You know, I have a voracious interest in learning new things and
Yes,
about new
obviously,
artists
clearly.
and new areas.
Plus, you spent, what, 30 trips to Europe looking at art just
Right.
to educate your eye?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
It just, because it
It's
just
a-
doesn't happen, you
it's
know?
a passion.
Yeah, you have to have a passion to be
Right.
able to digest
Yeah.
all these different
Yeah.
forms and go, that's interesting, as well as the one that he did in the 30s downtown
That's right.
LA. Yeah, I find that interesting,
Yeah.
people who can do that. Not everybody can,
Well,
but if you have the passion and the interest,
Yeah,
then you might end up with a museum.
yeah, that's right.
So be careful.
It's a crazy idea. Be careful. That's right.
Yes.
So this is a painting by Roger Kunst. It's one of the blimp paintings, and of course the blimp is iconic in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Goodyear blimp. This is kind of kept in right off the 405 freeway, and it's under lock and chain.
Yes.
So I couldn't figure out for a long time how the artist got this close to it. But somebody on a tour told me that the artist's brother was the pilot. And that's why he got in to see it.
Yes.
And I think it's an interesting view of the blimp. It's the view we never see. We always see the blimp, but we never see the close-up of the car underneath here.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And it's a great landscape, actually.
Yeah.
So you look at that back part right here, I mean, it has this Mark Bowles, again, Wayne Thiebaud even, kind of sensibility, Gregory Kondos.
So Roger Kunst was an important Claremont artist.
Yes.
And we have quite a few of his paintings in our collection.
And is that because you fell in love with his work and go, this is somebody we should collect?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, he's interesting perspective.
I like this. Ooh.
Yeah, this is by Henrietta Burke, who was one of the Bay Area figurative artists. Her name isn't as widely known, but she was a fantastic artist, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But look at her ability with color and
Kind
palette.
of palette knife, yeah.
Now this is a rendition of Jackie and John F. Kennedy
You can see it.
having a picnic in Hyannisport. And I remember the photo of them, during the election, being on the television all the time.
I'm sure.
Creating the idea of Camelot, you know.
And the time frame on this is so interesting, 62 to 64. I'm sure this was painted right after his death as kind of a,
memorial.
Yeah, makes sense.
In fact, there was a newspaper article of the artist, of Henrietta Burke. There was a picture of her living room in the newspaper, and this was actually hanging over her fireplace.
It meant something to her.
It really did.
Yeah, and then how did you end up with this? Do you remember?
Well, here again, it's a collector friend of mine obtained this piece, and he felt it was the best Henrietta Burke he had seen up till that moment. And he called me up and he says, I've got this great Henrietta Burke, and I'd like to have this in the museum.
Yes.
So I bought it, and then early last year, let's see, it's been maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we did a show at Henrietta Burke, and this, of course, was a featured painting in that show.
Yeah, because it falls right into what you see the vision of this museum as storytelling. This tells so much about a time frame and the possibilities. You look at this and it's, happy and the possibilities, and they're young. But it's done finished in 64. After his murder, assassination. Yeah, interesting.
So here we're going to try something totally different.
Oh yeah, this is cool.
This is totally different.
I love this.
You might wonder, what the heck is this doing
I know
here?
exactly what all this is.
So my parents had an appliance store in Pasadena, and growing up, one of my jobs was to take the radio out of the box and put it up on the shelf and put a price tag on it. And one day I started looking at the radio and thinking to myself, this is a really interesting design. And so but I didn't think much about it until many years later. I was in an antique shop, and somebody offered me a radio, it was black and red, plastic, and I thought, well, this is very interesting design and color. I'll buy it. It was $50 or something, and I took it home and I found out it was on the cover of the radio book, and that it was valued at about $6,500. So I thought, wow, this is great. So every so often I'd go to an antique shop and I'd see an interesting radio. In those days, people weren't collecting these too much. They still aren't really. But then something happened, and it was called eBay. And once eBay opened up, I started buying a lot of radios on eBay because they were coming up. And you can still buy these sometimes for $50, $60 on eBay. And
a lot of these are made out of Bakelite, right?
Some are Bakelite.
Those are probably the more valuable ones, I would think.
Well, they are actually the Catalan plastic are the most valued. Here's an example of one of the Catalan plastics.
It doesn't even look like it would be real, right? It looks like it's. Again, so you had to educate yourself on this completely different area and learn price structure, because You know, you can't just pay willy-nilly, and you have to understand, just like you told me. Tell me what that is, what kind of...
It's Catalin plastic.
What is it?
Catalin.
Catalin plastic. See, you gotta learn. That's why you go to museums. So you learn about it. And so this is a group of pieces that you... What date of the time frames are these from?
These are mostly from the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yes.
Now we cut off about 1960 because once they get past that, they become less interesting. But in the 40s, there were 10,000 radio manufacturers competing with each other.
Right. Wow.
And in order to differentiate themselves, they had to hire the very top designers in the world to design the radio cabinets, and they were experimenting with interesting designs and plastics during that period. And so you see this golden age of American design. And in fact, this gallery, although we don't have it up here, the gallery is kind of about American design. So we'll have another show coming up on what we call novelty radios. And that'll be a whole different show. So we have about 400 radios in the collection, so we can continue to rotate.
Yeah, you did take it rather seriously.
Like I do everything.
Yeah, I can tell.
This is probably the key painting, and this is a painting.
Right, it's a radio, right?
Radio.
Yeah, but it looks like a painting. If you saw that, you might think it were.
Art Deco design.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and it's a great design by one of the great designers. This was created in 1935, and it was about $350 at the time.
Oh my!
And you could buy a brand new Ford for $350.
Oh yeah, that's a lot.
So they didn't make a lot of these, but they're very rare. You see a few of these at museums. I know MoMA had a show on Art Deco design, and I think they used this very piece as the signature piece.
It makes sense. I mean, it's so over the top, right?
Right.
And so, do you remember where you got this?
This I bought at auction, at Christie's auction in New York.
Yeah.
Because it was still left over, I guess,
Care
from
to
that
share
show.
the price? What it was?
Yeah, I paid $50,000 for it. But I understand one recently sold for $200,000.
Yeah.
So they've become kind of like a real important collector's
Well,
item.
as you said, they're iconic, right?
Right.
And there's, I mean, how many of them survive? Not many. Maybe
I only
40,
know
50 tops in the world?
No,
Not even?
No, I don't even think that many were sold.
Oh, wow. Well, they were $350. That's a lot.
Yeah. So I only know of 3.
Oh, wow. So super rare.
Yeah. So there was one in Florida at a Florida museum. There was the one in MoMA, which I think this is it.
Yes.
And I don't know of any others, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
So
maybe one of the rarest things in the museum.
Yeah.
And it's a radio. That's very cool.
Okay, moving along.
Yeah. Here you go. Okay. Oh, so much.
So here we have more contemporary work. Some of the work here is from today. I mean, things that were done in the last 10 or 15 years. This is a painting by Frank Romero, and this has to do telling the story of a standoff between the Chicano people in Montebello on Whittier Boulevard, where they tried to shut down the cruising on Whittier Boulevard, and the police came in and, you know, they had quite a skirmish, and this was covered in the newspaper and the television very thoroughly.
I'm sure.
Until they worked that out. But it's Frank Romero, who is a Chicano artist that also painted murals along the freeways in the 60s. So he became an important artist of the original Chicano group.
And so are you constantly kind of trying to see who the next artist is that's out there, or important artists like Dennis Semensky, who's a California artist?
Right.
I mean, you were quite aware of him already.
Right.
So
I'm always looking at who's out there, you know, and trying to add some of those paintings to the collection.
Yeah,
it keeps evolving.
Right.
We're still buying paintings.
right, it's a living organism, basically.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Over here we have an interesting painting by Danny Galeotti. I call this the
I love this.
Michelangelo of our collection. And he was a Disney artist for about 12 years. He lives in Burbank, and he decided to become a fine artist. He left Disney and he went to Florence to study the great masters. And So one night, some years later, one night on his bedstand, he, in the middle of the night, in a dream, he kind of sketched out a painting that he had studied in Florence called the Battle of Caccina. That was done by Michelangelo. And there's a whole story about that. Here is the original painting right here.
I see.
Of the sketch that was created. This was actually recreated after Michelangelo died. But it gives you the composition that he used as a basis of this painting, except this was done, you know, in a time frame of the 1500s. This is done in the
2020.
Yeah, maybe 1940s or something.
Yeah.
And it's just a moment in time at the beach in California. But it's very animated. It's very difficult for an artist to foreshorten arms and torsos and bodies and have them interacting like this and create something like this. There are very few artists that could do anything of this.
Yeah, and then again, there's story
nature.
after story after story.
So this is a brilliant, just a brilliant painting.
And only one person is looking, only one thing is looking at us.
Yes.
The dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything else is action.
And
then
where's
this
the dog?
One little,
There we go.
you know, is like,
That's good observation.
well, there's a lot to this. I mean, there's a lot going on in this. I see all the little, you know, the Coke and the Coke bottles, Life magazine, all the kind of
Look at the sandcastle right here.
Yeah, iconic images of what he would expect to see at that time frame. Yeah, that's a wonderful
It's a
thing.
masterpiece.
Yeah,
of our
no,
collection.
into itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to.
And how did you end up with this?
Well, I walked into a gallery in Laguna Beach, and there it was.
There you go.
I looked at it. I realized immediately it was a Michelangelo-inspired piece.
Yeah, and again, that's from your 30 trips to Europe.
That's right.
Looking at things,
Yes,
and you
that's
can
right.
put it together.
That's right. Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
Parallel. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few other things that I think are interesting. We have this Scott Moore called 24 Carats,
I love this.
which is kind of a surreal piece.
Oh yeah, that's wonderful.
He's a Laguna Beach artist,
Yeah.
and I love the light, but I love the storytelling. You know,
Everything.
with the
Pairing thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Carrot.
It's called 24 Carats, and if you count up
I
the
bet
carats,
there is, right?
right.
Yeah, so interesting.
And when I went to when I went to his gallery to pick this painting up,
Yes.
I saw a wall with a shelf with all these little animated wind-up figures.
Yes,
in
he has.
it.
He has.
He has
Yeah.
a huge collection
Yeah.
of these.
Yeah, I'm sure he's an interesting person. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
just tell by his sense of humor,
Totally.
you know, to come up with this idea.
Yeah, yeah,
And again, it translates to you. Whatever it is that you see here clicked.
yeah.
And
Well, I buy paintings that I find interesting for myself and my wife,
yes,
and hope that they resonate with people.
Yeah.
And most of the time they do.
this one did for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think like this makes me laugh. And when I see something, for me,
Yeah.
that's art. If
Yeah.
it makes an emotion, it can be anger, it can be upset, it can be just something.
Right.
And this one has that for me. It's like a giggle when I see it because it's whimsical
That's right.
and well painted.
I think we have to have some laughs in a museum because a lot of people are intimidated by going to an art museum.
Yes.
We tried to design this museum to be easy to use, convenient, and a friendly museum.
Yes.
So all of our docents are trained to be able to help people.
Yes.
And you know, and have a few laughs along the way.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
It's important.
It is important.
Interested in the Indian room?
Oh yeah, so here is one of my favorites. So, and I haven't got to see this, so for me it's exciting. I love textiles. You know, these are all transitional blankets, you know, from that even as early as 85, but mainly 1890 to 1900. And, you know, it's just, it's an array. It's actually interesting, just standing here, I feel the vibration of these textiles.
Yeah,
I really
it's pretty
do.
palpable, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. So let's talk a little bit about this because I clearly have interest in it and you do too.
Yeah.
This is kind of where it all started for you, right?
Yes, 50 years ago I started collecting Native American, and we've put together a collection of maybe 60 Navajo weavings.
Right.
Mostly pre-1960s 60.
Yeah.
But quite a few paintings from the 19th century, of which all of these are.
Yeah, textiles. Mm-hmm.
And one of those little subgroups of our collection is eyedazzlers.
Right.
And here you see an array of eyedazzlers, and,
Yes.
and nothing has more of an eyedazzler appeal than when you look at this. I mean,
Yeah, it does.
Makes your eyes go crazy.
It does.
With all of the colors. And I think the other thing that's interesting is we're telling the story, and you've done this in your book, on the forerunners of abstract
Yes.
art.
Yes,
which
that's right.
we have pictured some of the pictures over here from the book.
And in that book, Homage to the Square, we have a piece that Andy Warhol owned, which was a Germantown eyedazzler.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so he got it too.
Yeah, well, and there were other artists that
Oh,
were
so many. Yeah, Jasper Johns.
that
and
were
different
part
people.
of the color field artists.
Yes,
group.
yes. And sculptors too, like Donald Judd. So you go to his studio in Marfa, you're going to see similar kind of 1890s, 1910 pieces, but on the more simple block design, because that's what he found interesting. So, I mean, this completely correlates nicely, I think, with what you've tried to do in a museum altogether. And these were made, you know, these aren't pieces that really were made for self-use. They were made to be sold. And the artists, because they now have this ability to use things like Germantown yarns, explode. Their creativity is now unbridled to do and see the world as they want to.
Which is an interesting thing, a point that you're bringing up, because it had to do with the train coming through in 1870.
Yes.
And along with it came entrepreneurs that established trading posts around the Indian territories. And in the trading posts, they sold dyes, color dyes, and wool in colors that the Native Americans had never seen before.
Yes, that's right.
And what you see here is that explosion of creativity with all these new color choices that they have.
That's right. And yarns too, things that might allow them to weave faster because they didn't, you know, it takes 40% of their time to spin, so technology changes that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because they're not making things for self-use or trade now, they have trading posts like Hubble, comes in 1878, set up, and now they're like, oh, we can do different things and get paid for it and be creative, still to a traditional component. Again, I'm not Navajo, and the Navajos would have their own their own interpretation of this. But when you see this, you can really feel, I can feel the singular artist. Each person I see as a important artist. They have their own vision. Yeah. And you saw it too, and you put together, I think, some of the best examples.
Well, we've got a nice show going here, I think, for now, but we got another show coming up next.
And what's that going to be?
Well, we're going to show some of the orotones.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, by the artist, the photographer.
Edward Curtis, yeah.
So that should be interesting.
Oh, that'll be and will that be in this show room, or? Yeah.
So we're going to do turnover. We'll have different shows in this room.
Different exhibits of things that you've collected that are maybe a little more Western, vintage type imagery. Yeah, that's cool. I think they should be shown as fine art in the same breath as, you know, one of these that was done in 2020, you know, because they're just as important and relevant now, in my opinion, as they were when they were made in 1890, if not more, quite frankly.
So I think it's interesting for people. Again, it opens the world up to people here.
Yeah, I'm sure people, if you saw this blanket, which is 1890s, turn of the century kind of thing, and the context was different. If it's in a modern museum of art, they might think it's brand new by some amazing textile artist, or you know, but it's not. 1890s, you know, Navajo Dene artist. And so now, it's always nice when you make the transition to Norman Rockwell.
Well, amazing artist.
Wow.
He was collected.
That's really amazing. That's a beautiful collection.
We have an artist that's probably one of the greatest visual storytellers.
Period.
Of all times. And he's favored by and collected by George Lucas and and others.
Including they have their own museum, right?
Which hasn't opened yet, but they're going to feature a lot of Norman Rockwell.
And so, how did you, I mean, clearly it fits your narrative, I want things that tell a story.
Right.
But which piece was the one that you first started collecting?
Well, I don't happen to have that particular piece, but this is the first Norman Rockwell of importance, which was a cover of...
this cover, right?
Yes, that cover, Post Magazine, 1946.
Yes, 46.
And it happens to have more people in it than any other painting. In fact...
That he ever did.
That he ever did. In fact, there were so many stories going on that he actually had to blow up little pieces, little vignettes all around here to kind of show all the some of the different parts of stories that were going on simultaneously.
Yeah, how did you get this? It's so interesting because you have all these little blow-ups of all
I
these.
just took a blow-up of different parts of this.
Oh, I see. I see what you did. Okay.
Yeah, just to
that's
expand
interesting.
it. So this whole wall just tries to explain the painting because there is so much storytelling going on simultaneously.
Yeah. It must be thrilling to have a painting like that in your museum.
The more I've looked at this painting, the more I realize what a genius he was, because to be able to do this with a pencil and charcoal, to create something as detailed and it's just an unbelievable piece of art.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that he's one of the absolute great artists that ever came out of America.
Yeah, and it starts with drawing.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is, I agree, is very important.
I don't think anybody could draw better than Norman Rockwell.
No, that's right there, for sure.
His work goes for, millions of dollars, 40, 50, 60 million dollars today.
I mean, illustrative art has finally, I think, found its calling. Yeah, for so long it was considered secondary art or whatever, and that's completely flipped. In the last probably 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so if you want to see a great collection of Norman Rockwell, which are right next to a great collection of Navajo textiles, you're only going to see it at the Hilbert Museum.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great, I think I love seeing this Navajo textiles juxtaposed to Norman Rockwell.
Oh, yes. So this gallery is about Orange County. So our opening show, we decided to take some paintings from different places in Orange County. And so this happens to be a contemporary painting by Kearney Erickson. And I realized when we were putting together the show that I didn't actually have a painting of orange groves. And orange groves were so much a part of California, but the artists, it was so common everywhere, artists didn't paint it.
Right.
So
why would they, right?
I commissioned Kearney to paint this painting of orange groves, very typical of what you might see here in Orange County.
Yes.
And here is what he created, which I think is a really nice example of...
I love having the Irvine store.
This is the original Irvine post office.
Yes.
That was probably built in the teens. And it was there until probably the early 2000s.
Wow.
Maybe is when it came down. So it was there a long time. But, there wasn't much in Irvine. The population probably was several hundred people in Irvine.
It was agricultural.
Yeah. So
changed, as all things do. I mean, you've seen this change close hand because you've been here your entire life.
Oh, yeah. It's been... So we have postcards of early Orange County scenes.
Yes.
Different places around Orange County. So it's like a little history book, visual history book. And then over here, one, of course, the most important thing to happen in Orange County is Disneyland.
Yeah.
This is really a contemporary painting by Bradford Solomon. And Bradford here is taking a postcard of the original Disneyland entrance. So when you were going to go to Disneyland, this is what you saw when it was first opened. And a lot of people do remember.
Yeah, I remember that, actually.
Yeah.
I was young, but I remember.
Sure. So moving into, now we're into the cinema arts galleries.
Here's the Mary Blair.
And this is the Mary Blair. People might ask me, well, why do you cover cinema arts? Well, our goal is to show all facets of California artists.
Sure.
And of course, the artists were not only doing fine art, but a lot of those very same artists were working at the studios during the week. And here you have an example of that with Mary Blair.
And this is all her work?
These are all concept paintings that she did, primarily her work on Peter Pan, Cinderella, and Alice in Wonderland. And if you look at some of her beautiful concept paintings, you know, her sense of color is absolutely amazing. And her designs and the ideas in her paintings, I think, are just unbelievable. Look at this cave here. It's almost like going back to the womb. But you've got this
And so when you bought this, did you buy this as a group of pieces?
No, one at a time.
You managed to do it one at a time?
So we have about 48 of these or something, one at a time.
Well, and some of these are the most iconic images, right?
They are.
I mean, like Wendy and that, and the, you know, Peter Pan and things like that.
Well, she was a legend at Disney, and then later Walt called her back to work on Small World, and so you see here examples of some of her work in Small World.
Oh, that's interesting, for the actual park.
Yeah, so she did all of that, and of course the Small World ride is probably, overall, probably more people went through that over the years than any ride at Disney.
I believe that. I mean, I still remember.
Yeah. Well, you want to hum that tune for us?
No, please do not. I don't want it in my head. Whoever made that tune was diabolical, because once you get it going, you can't stop.
Have a look at this beautiful piece.
Oh yeah, the
and
teacups.
You might want to
Alice
zero in on this piece.
Yeah, Alice in Wonderland.
It's a very modernist style. And I think later on the teacup ride might have come as an inspiration, because this was done probably in the early 50s.
Are people starting to figure out who Mary Blair is?
Oh yeah.
They do? Okay.
Oh yeah. When we opened up the show, we had people come in and dressed in Mary Blair dresses with Mary Blair purses, because she designed clothing that was sold at Disneyland. So
makes sense.
There's a huge following
Yes.
of Mary Blair people.
Yes, especially probably in Southern California, I would think.
That's nationwide, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, we know her image. We know the movies,
Yes,
so
that's
makes
right.
sense.
Yeah. So we're getting to the end. This is the last gallery.
Yeah, and again, this is all her work.
This is all her work.
Yeah.
I would
or
say
a variety.
This is a variety of different things, but this happens to be a cell, the Cheshire Cat in a tree, 1951. And so this was a cell from the production, which I found at auction. I really like the way this is done. And
so when you find something like that, is the excitement when you find it or when you actually get to own it?
well, it's a combination. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah.
I think it's the hunt. I think is what we narrow it down to.
Because I know when I see something that I hadn't seen before, I get very excited. It's like, oh, this fills in part of the puzzle I didn't understand. And then if you actually get it, it seems like there's even a kind of a greater high.
Well, for me, I get a high when we hang it up in the gallery, and so people can start to see it.
Yeah, and then you see their reaction.
Yeah, yeah.
And they see the same. And if they see the same thing you saw, it has to be very rewarding.
Well, it is, but it's rewarding to hear things that they see that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because that's how I learn about these pieces.
Yeah.
So it's a evolution.
Very good. I've had Mark Hilbert. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through and explain what you've done, what you've given to this community and to the art world. I think it's really a beautiful gift that you've done, and thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come over here to film us. I really appreciate it a lot.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. Thank you.